This lecture focuses on Chapter 8, which includes crimes against public disorder and public decency. Crimes against public disorder include a wide range of different behaviors that have been prohibited from time to time. Traditionally, these were known as breach of peace offenses. Now, many of these offenses that we were going to cover under crimes against public disorder have been declared unconstitutional or no longer crimes. They've been declared unconstitutional because they may be too vague, they may violate particular constitutional rights, such as right to assemble or free speech, or they offend the Constitution in other ways. But they were very often in history, they were very generally written. And as you can see here, the breach of peace included such things as any willful act that disturbed the public tranquility or peace or order, and for which there was no legal justification. One type of crime against public disorder could be included under the category of fighting words. So if someone is engaging in some kind of threatening behavior through their speech, it is possible that they could be arrested. But the definition of fighting words is pretty specific because we do want to protect freedom of speech. So the Supreme Court has said that in order for something to be a fighting word and to not be protected under the freedom of speech that's found in the First Amendment, then that speech must constitute some kind of direct threat to a person, and it's of the nature that it would provoke a person to respond with violence. It doesn't actually have to result in violence, but if the words are threatening enough that a reasonable person might respond to violence, these could be construed as fighting words. But again, it has to be a direct threat to a person. So if I stand up in front of a large crowd and I say some very obnoxious or offensive things, I say I hate all of the military. I think that the U.S. Army is a criminal organization, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I really say these kind of radical things. If it's in front of a crowd and I'm not directing it at a particular individual, it won't likely be construed as fighting words. There could be some other provisions that might apply, but generally speaking, I'm protected if I just give this broad speech. However, if I go up to a specific veteran and I say, I hate you, you're a killer, you're a criminal, and I'd like to see you dead, all these kinds of things, then those words, because they're directed at a specific individual, could be construed as fighting words. And I could be arrested maybe for harassment, I could be arrested for some kind of threat. These kinds of things could be possible, and I couldn't claim First Amendment protection because my words would be construed as fighting. Many of you may be familiar, unfortunately, with disorderly conduct. This is another broad category, and it included a whole host of different behaviors that disrupted the peace. You can see in this list, traditionally they included crimes against drinking in public, fighting, disturbing the peace, etc., etc. In most states today, we may still have a broad disorderly conduct statute, but we may also have other statutes that cover some specific forms of disorderly conduct, like public intoxication. In Pennsylvania, we do have a disorderly conduct statute, and you can see that a person is guilty of disorderly conduct if, with intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly creating a risk of those things, he or she does one of the following four behaviors. So first of all, before we get into the four things, first of all, the person must have an intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly creating a risk of those. So there must be a specific intent. So it's not just, as we'll see, for instance, if you look at number 3, using obscene language, it's not just swearing, but it's swearing with intent to cause public inconvenience, to annoy another person, to alarm another person. So it's not just merely tripping on the sidewalk and swearing, but there must have been an intent to actually cause some kind of alarm. So we add that to so that we're not just criminalizing every kind of minor behavior. We add that specific kind of intent. So with that kind of intent, does the person, one, engage in fighting or threatening or violent or tumultuous behavior? So these are minor kinds of fights or threats. Um, this isn't a full-scale riot or extreme tumultuous behavior, damaging all kinds of property, those things. But this is someone who takes a swing at another person on the street corner after they've been at the bar for a while. They could be charged with disorderly conduct. In addition, if the person they took a swing at wanted to press assault charges, that could be done. So number one is some kind of fighting or threatening or tumultuous behavior. Number two, you make unreasonable noise. So again, it's not just you fall down and you scream out in pain, but it's you're walking down Beaver Avenue at 2 a.m. and you're just screaming at the top of your lungs to try to wake up everybody. This could be defined then as disorderly conduct because you're doing it to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, alarm, etc., etc. Number three, we've already mentioned if you use obscene language or make an obscene gesture. So you're going to be protected if you utter the F word or give somebody the finger and those kinds of things. If you say them in public, just generally, you're walking down the street and you're talking about something you did this weekend and you utter the F word, that's not going to be disorderly conduct. But if you do those things, again, to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, alarm, then yes, obscene language and obscene gestures could be disorderly conduct. And finally, if you create some kind of hazardous or physically offensive condition by any act for which there's no legitimate purpose, then you could be guilty of disorderly conduct. So this is kind of a catch-all category. So if you do something, you are swinging from a lamppost on College Avenue and you may be swinging out into traffic, and those we can charge you with disorderly conduct because obviously you have no legitimate purpose to do so, and it's creating a hazard to yourself, um, probably not to others, but at least to yourself. So we can charge you with disorderly conduct, some kind of physically offensive condition. Could also, so whatever that may be, it's a broad category, but it could include a lot of things. So any of these things with that specific intent could be disorderly conduct. Now, the thing that, because this could include a lot of behavior, the way we kind of mitigate the, the feelings that we shouldn't be punishing this kind of behavior, perhaps, or that it's maybe really subjective, the way we mitigate that is we don't punish disorderly conduct that severely. You're likely going to be charged with a summary offense, which means you pay a fine, you're not facing any jail time, and you're done. So it is a way to control behavior, but because it could encompass so many behaviors, and these are relatively minor behaviors, we don't punish it too severely. Two other disorderly, I shouldn't say disorderly, two other public disorder offenses that we've traditionally had are vagrancy and loitering. These are most likely not going to be present in their general form in any state today because we've had several Supreme Court opinions that have struck down vagrancy laws and loitering laws. So what is vagrancy? Vagrancy is a very old crime. It dates back to a time when there was a labor shortage in Europe, and so this was a way to force people to work. And so if we look at the vagrancy statutes, we can see that they mostly included wandering around from place to place without any means of support. And so if you were wandering from town to town, we found you in our town, you didn't have a job, you couldn't show that you were supported by anyone, you were just basically, for lack of a better term, you were a bum, a hobo, any of these terms that we might associate with the Great Depression. You were just wandering around from place to place without any kind of job or means of support. You could be charged with vagrancy. And often the penalty, in Europe especially, was you'd be put to work. Well, because these are so vague and so broad that today we're likely to find that they've been declared unconstitutional as offenses because why can't a person move from town to town and not have a job and just loaf around and just live by whatever means they can find? So today, we don't punish this behavior. We're not going to see vagrancy laws. And in the 1960s, especially 1970s, when many of these laws were struck down by the Supreme Court, they were often used as a way to punish civil rights protesters and others who had, for instance, come to the South to fight racial injustice. And so the vagrancy laws were used as a way to punish them and to control them. And so again, the Supreme Court struck down many of these laws. So, similarly, loitering isn't very common today as an offense. Loitering didn't require wandering around from place to place, but it was just lingering in a place without a legitimate reason. So if you're standing in front of a store and you're not buying anything, you're not doing anything, you're just standing there, that could be loitering. Now, a private individual, if this is a private store, they can put up signs and say no loitering. And if you loiter there, you're not going to be arrested for loitering, but you'll be arrested for trespass. So private business, person, whoever, someone other than the government, can put up no loitering signs and have them enforced through the trespass laws or other kinds of laws. But as far as an offense against the public, we don't see it typically anymore. Now, Pennsylvania does have it has no general loitering law, but it does prohibit malicious loitering. So this is a very specific kind of lingering in a place. It's basically you're hanging around outside somebody's house and it appears that you have the intent to commit a crime inside, that you're waiting, you're stalking them. Um, it's some kind of very specific loitering. And so those have been upheld because those kinds of loitering statutes require malicious intent, that you are lingering about that location because you're planning to commit a crime. So it's not just simply hanging out because you've got nothing else to do and you're hanging out in the street corner. That's going to be allowed, that's going to be protected. But if you are hanging out around somebody's house or business or whatever it is, and it's the police officers believe that you have a malicious intent, and the prosecutor is able to prove that in court, you could be arrested with malicious loitering.